My name is Schwartz. I'm Vice President of Marketing for B.Y.O.D. And just by way of quick introduction, B.Y.O.D is a content services company, and our technology enables, it's basically a learning platform that enables content storage, distribution, and analytics. And we have been coming to Chart for many, many years. I think this is our 10th year as a silver sponsor of Chart. However, this is my first time at Chart, and I have to say that after all of the trips to the hospitality suite, all of the happy hours, all of the libations-filled meals, when I got up here to talk about do the benefits of B.Y.O.D outweigh the risks, I got a little nervous that B.Y.O.D to this crowd is going to mean something very different than what I'm going to talk about. Just to be clear, B.Y.O.D is bring your own device. And that's basically the trend that companies are leveraging the supercomputers that all their employees are carrying around in their pockets and in their purses and staring at all day. And in our context, what we see is there's many companies in different industries that are really taking this on in a learning environment. However, in the hospitality space, it doesn't seem to have really taken off yet. So what I'm going to do is kind of introduce you to some of the benefits of B.Y.O.D, and then I'll talk a little bit about some of the challenges, and then give you some best practices how you and your company can get around the challenges to really implement a B.Y.O.D program for your learning platform. Okay, so first of all, why is B.Y.O.D good for learning and development? Well, first of all, employees claim that they're much more productive in a learning environment when they're using their own device as part of one of their learning tools. These are essentially collaboration tools. So if you're using them to collaborate, it just makes sense that you're going to learn, when you're using it as a learning platform, you'll also be doing more collaboration. Your employees are familiar with them. You don't have to train them how to use these devices. They make them happy. I mean, if you think about it, we all carry these things around all the time, and people develop a personal relationship, in a sense, with their phones and their tablets, and they enjoy using them. And the fifth reason, and this is probably the most overlooked, is that your employees are willing to pay for these things themselves. And when you consider that the technology changes out every 12 to 18 months, that's a significant benefit for you as a company. So I'm going to give you 3 quick numbers to think about here. 21%. 21% is the measured increase in learner retention when employees are using their own personal devices to review the content that you've taught them in class or however you teach them. Number 2, 5 hours a day. We heard a little bit about millennials before. Well, 5 hours a day is what the time that is spent by millennials staring at their phones every day. And number 3, 96% per a Cisco Systems study on B.Y.O.D, 96% of the respondents to the study claimed that they wanted to use, one of the reasons they wanted to use B.Y.O.D was specifically for learning. That was the #1 category in the study. So when you take all of this into consideration, you have to ask yourself, well, why isn't it more pervasive? I mean, why don't we all use B.Y.O.D? And to answer that question, we're going to turn to one of the premier experts on corporate culture in America. Okay, here's Gilbert, and he's saying, my only hope for productivity is to smuggle in my home laptop, or PC, or cell phone or tablet. And he gets caught by somebody, this must be the HR or the IT guy. Now hand over that non-standard cell phone you keep in your underpants. There's a lot of reasons why IT and HR should be worried about B.Y.O.D. There's a lot of different problems, and they typically fall in 3 areas. The first is security, the second is policy, and the third is financial liability. So I'm going to quickly kind of give you some thoughts to think about in the time I have left about each one of those categories, with what we've seen as best practices in different verticals. Okay, the first, security. So IT is typically worried about 2 things in terms of security. Your corporation's intellectual property, your IP, and their network. So there are some things within your B.Y.O.D policy that you can use to address that. Number 1, your applications should all have some kind of inherent security. There's tons of stuff out on the internet that you can download. It's free and it's great. However, if you're deploying it as part of an overall program, you really need to look at things that have security built in. Number two, consider restricting the way you share content. You know, it's really easy to take a PDF and send it out to a whole bunch of people, but then you really have no control or any idea of what's going to happen to that next. I mean, if this is your corporation's IP or your recipes, your menus, things like that, they could be out on the internet or with your competitors in no time. And number three, always get IT involved. I mean, this is a little bit of a CYA kind of measure, but it's really important. They can help you overcome a lot of the obstacles and the concerns that you might not even think about. Okay, the next thing, policy. How do you develop an effective policy about B.Y.O.D in your company for a learning program? So first of all, some of the things we've seen are you specify desired devices. And this is to really help support issues, right? So you want people to know exactly what you will allow them to use. Number two and number three, these go together. Create an acceptable use policy. You want to tell people how and when they can use your content. And make sure they understand who owns the data. Even though it's on their device, those applications and that data is still yours. And you need to consider having your employees sign off on this. And then the last thing that many companies strangely overlook is create an exit strategy. We just heard about how employees turnover is very common. Well, a lot of companies don't think what happens when an employee leaves and they've got all of our IP. What are they going to do with it? I mean, many of them go to our competitors. So, you know, consider how you're going to claw that information back. When you distribute it digitally through certain types of applications, it's easy to do. Okay, and the last area, and this is the one that trips people up quite a bit, is how do you cover your own financial liability? And the reason for this is there are a lot of laws in the books in different states, and it's completely ranges from California to Texas, completely different rules. But as you have employees that are using their personal time and their personal devices for anything that you ask them to do, you've got to be able to somehow compensate them for it. And there are a lot of ways to do this, and frankly, over the last few years, it's gotten a lot easier because so many companies do this now. There's payroll stipends, there's some companies pay for total coverage. There's a whole different variety of ways to do it. What we see with companies that have hourly employees is they'll oftentimes pay the employees for an hour, maybe two, every pay period extra, or maybe every month, and that time is designated specifically for corporate learning. And then you provide the material, however you provide the material, but if you provide it over a digital device, it's, you know, you're covered, basically. So I can't go into too much detail about all of these things. We do have a white paper, and I'll give you the URL for it in a second. It's free. You can download it, and if you're interested, you can get a lot more information about how you address B.Y.O.D issues. In summary, and again, despite everything I've just talked about, it's gotten a lot easier to do B.Y.O.D over the last few years. And if you can get there, you'll increase employee happiness, you'll increase learner retention, and you really just have to think through steps for security, developing an effective B.Y.O.D policy, and figuring out how you're going to cover your employees' costs. So with that, the URL that I told you to go to is learnbiotech.com. Again, it's a free white paper, and you can get a lot more information on this topic. You can also send an email to me. I'm in the Wooga app. You're welcome to call me, ask me questions, connect with me on LinkedIn. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.